Hi, so today I am going to talk about Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia has long been recognized as a crossroad of the sea due to its strategic maritime location, connecting the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. The region is a complex network of waterways, straits, and seas, making it a crucial hub for trade, cultural exchange, and geopolitical interactions. Southeast Asia is a region with diverse historical influences, religious tradition, linguistic diversity, and economic goals. It is a transition zone from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean and from the northern hemisphere to the southern. The region has a rich history with some of the world's longest established indigenous groups still living traditional ways. Before European colonization, traders from China, India, and the Arab world exchanged goods, influencing local human geography. Southeast Asia is home to some of the world's wealthiest countries, with Singapore having the highest per capita wealth. The region has faced challenges from Japanese occupation, communism, and the US's dominoes theory. In 1967, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand established the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN) to combat these threats. Southeast Asia experienced a tropical climate characterized by high temperatures, high humidity, and distinct wet and dry seasons. The region is situated near the equator and its climate is influenced by the monsoon wind. And I am going to explain about the equatorial, oceanic, and both of the characteristics. Southeast Asia, which is located near the equator, showcases distinct equatorial and oceanic characteristics. The equatorial influence is evident in the region's consistently high temperature, ranging from warm to hot throughout the year. High humidity prevails, contributing to a tropical and humid climate. The presence of monsoon wind dictates the distinct wet and dry seasons, with the wet season drawing moist air from the Indian Ocean and the dry season characterized by cooler, drier air from the Asian continent. Meanwhile, the oceanic influence is profound due to Southeast Asia's proximity to various bodies of waters. Coastal areas experience a moderating effect on temperatures, with milder fluctuation compared to inland regions. The maritime influence contributes to unique weather patterns, occasionally leading to typhoon and cyclone activity, especially along the Pacific Ocean facing coast. The region's extensive coastline fosters rich marine biodiversity, establishing Southeast Asia as a global hotspot for diverse ecosystems in both terrestrial and marine environment. Next is environmental problem faced by Southeast Asia, which is natural hazard, tsunami, pollution, erosion, and mining excavations. Southeast Asia faces a myriad of geological and environmental challenges that significantly impact the life of its inhabitants. The region is situated in a seismically active zone, with many people residing close to the tectonic plate boundaries, making them very vulnerable to earthquake and volcanic eruptions. Indonesia, in particular, holds the distinction of having the highest numbers of active volcanoes globally, exposing its population to periodic volcanic activities and associated hazards. Simultaneously, global climate change, causing ice melt and rising sea levels, presents a significant peril to the low-lying islands and coastal areas. These environmental challenges demand robust strategies for disaster preparedness, sustainable urban planning, and climate change mitigation, emphasizing the need for international cooperation to bolster resilience and safeguard communities in this dynamic and vulnerable region. The tsunami is the second problem I have moved on to. The peninsula and island nature of the majority of Southeast Asian countries, located where the Indian and Pacific Oceans meet, result in extensive coastal territory in the region. There are extensive plate shift zones along the region's coastal stretches and beneath its water. Southeast Asia is exposed to tsunami, Japanese for harbor wave, due to plate shift beneath the ocean and the wide-ranging regional coast. Tsunamis are waves caused by water displacement caused by megathrust, serious uplift, seafloor earthquakes. The Pacific Ocean produced more tsunamis than any other ocean on Earth. On December 27, 2004, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake beneath the Indian Ocean caused a series of devastating tsunamis. The December 27 earthquake and aftershocks were caused by the subordination of the Indian plate beneath the Eurasian plate, causing uplift of the Eurasian plate and massive water displacement. The tsunami caused by the water displacement claimed many lives and destroyed property along the coast of Indonesia and Thailand in this region, as well as several other countries surrounding the Indian Ocean basin. Now, let us look at the third environmental problem, which is pollution, erosion, and mining excavations. Natural hazards are worsened by human use of the natural environment in areas with a high rate of population and modern industrialization. Development of agriculture combined with forest cutting for export timber has resulted in widespread deforestation in many parts of the region. Rapid loss of forests contribute to soil erosion, the watershed flooding, and harmful offshore dissolution of fisheries and coral reef areas, as slip is carried out to coastal waters. Vietnam warfare in the 1960s and 1970s defoliated forests and left chemical waste and barren hillside that took decades to recover from. Pollution of air, water, and soil is becoming a major problem in Southeast Asia as population density and industrial activity increase. More vehicles are used, and farming is made more productive through the use of fertilizers, pesticides, and mechanization.
Today, I'm excited to present a captivating exploration into the realms of culture, history, and colonialism. We'll be exploring the Khmer, Burmese, Thai, and Vietnamese empires, understanding how cultures intersect, and unveiling the stories of colonialism and independence. Let's take a journey through time and discover the unique tales that have shaped this land. I will start the presentation with the history of Khmer, Burmese, Thai, and Vietnamese empires. The Mon and Khmer people occupied present-day Cambodia from the north, and between the AD 800 and 1200, it was the center of the Khmer Empire. Later, Vietnamese, Laos, and Burmese arrived in the territories that now form their national center. Indian traders brought Hindu and Buddhist tradition and architecture across the ocean from the west, resulting in the western label of Indochina for Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. The area was a Vietnamese kingdom by the 1st century, and the Red River Valley in the north became the center of Thais and took on Chinese methods of government. After that, the Vietnamese extended their land southward across the mouth of the Mekong River in the AD 1400s. Myanmar became Buddhist as Sri Lanka monks disseminated Buddhism. The central pagan kingdom around present-day Mandalay was divided until the 1700s, when effort to promote Burmese expansion led to conflict with the British in India. A group of Thai-speaking people moved from western to southern China and into the western part of the Indochina Peninsula, forming a unified political grouping by the 1300 with its center at Ayutthaya. After conflict with Myanmar and Cambodia, the people established their cultural territory, which became modern Thailand. Now, we move to the cultural intersection. The island groups of Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines have experienced frequent power shift due to external influences. The Indonesia island have seen migration from India and China, leading to the establishment of a rice-based kingdom on Java in the AD 500. From the 600 to the 800s, ruling dynasties controlled the Malay Peninsula and much of present-day Indonesia, erecting Buddhist monuments. After that, Buddhism aided Hindu element in some areas, but Islam took over in most Western Malaysia and Indonesia. Not only that, a Filipino culture emerged in the 400s from mixed Malay, Indonesia, and Chinese influences. After the arrival of Muslim groups in the 1200s, local sultanates controlled the island strait. The people of Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei remained predominantly Muslim, with Indonesia being the world's largest Islamic state. Following our exploration of Khmer, Burmese, Thai, and Vietnamese empires and the cultural intersection, let's now turn our attention to a crucial phase, which is the colonial era and the pursuit of independence. The first country is Philippines. The Portuguese were the first colonial force to establish trading center in the Philippines. They were forced out by the Spanish, who built their capital at Manila on Luzon in the late 1500s. Spanish control attracted Roman Catholic priests and their monastic order, which assumed control over vast lands and resources. Rapid conversion to this new faith united many desperate groups of Filipinos in what became the only largely Christian country in Southeast Asia. Spain retained its Philippine colonies until the end of the 1800s, when the United States placed them under its jurisdiction after winning a war with Spain over Cuba, the Spanish-American War. Local opposition to colonial rule is increased during the 1930s and under Japanese occupation in the World War II. The Philippine Republic was established in 1946, and the United States retained its military bases there until 1990s, and then reactivated some after the attack on September 11, 2001. Next is Indonesia. After 200 years of intermittent fighting among Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and Britain, Java and the surrounding island became the Dutch East India colony in 1799. The Dutch trading headquarters of the Dutch East India Company, the city of Batavia, modern Jakarta, became their colonial capital in the late 1500. Local farmers were organized to produce coffee, rubber, and other new crops for export, but neglect of food production resulted in famines. Nationalist movement that began in the early 90s were further motivated by harsh Japanese treatment during their World War I occupation. Although the Dutch resisted granting independence after the war, it came in 1950 when the new country of Indonesia formed. Now, we look at the colonies and independence of Malaysia and Singapore. The Portuguese annexed Malacca in 1511 to control the spice trade, but lost control when the Dutch took over in 1600. The Dutch established a monopoly over the region, while the British established a port on Penang Island linked to Indian opium sales. In 1804, the British and Dutch agreed to control Malaya and the East Indies. The British built a new port at Singapore in 1819 and controlled the Malay state through diplomacy. The sultanates on Borneo's northern tip, Sabah, and northeastern coastline, Brunei and Sarawak, became British protectorates. Tamil, Indian, and Chinese laborers were brought to work in Malayan rubber plantation and tin mines. After World War II, the British re-established rule, fighting against communist guerrillas until Malaya gained independence in 1957. Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak joined the Federation of Malaysia in 1963, but Brunei stayed out. Myanmar. The British colonized Burma, renamed Myanmar by the current government, and made it a province of British India. The British developed a rice-growing industry in Irrawaddy River Delta and built the port of Yangon, Rangoon, to export the rice. Over 1 million Indians moved into this southern part of Myanmar, becoming the leaders of the country's commercial community. Attempts were made to unify the newly developed Lower Burma with the main Burmese population around Mandalay and the hill tribes. After riots against the British in the 1930s, the main independence group sided with the Japanese in World War II, but changed side toward the end and gained independence in 1948. Indochina. During the 1800s and early 1900s, the French occupied Indochina, including Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, constructing roads, railroads, and promoting manufacturing. During World War I, Nazi Germany allowed Japanese forces to pass through Indochina. After the war, the French attempted to regain control, but communist groups forced them to leave Vietnam in 1954. The divided country faced further warfare, with the US supporting South Vietnam. North Vietnam emerged victorious in 1975, reunifying the country. Laos experienced economic stagnation during the Vietnam War. Cambodia gained independence in 1953, but faced 30 years of civil war and Vietnam innovation. Last but not least, Thailand. Thailand, also known as Siam, was a country that maintained its independence during the colonial era through a strong monarchy and cooperative relationship with European powers. After the 1932 abolition of absolute monarchy, a rigorous bureaucracy rule influenced by the identical school buildings in all 76 provinces. Thailand's ruler established commercial treaties with Britain in the 1800s and encouraged modernization. In the 1890s, Thailand yielded land to France and some of the Malay Peninsula to Britain. In the World War I, Thailand initially sided with Japan, allowing Japanese armies to invade Burma and Malaya. However, Thailand regained territories in Malaya and Cambodia and supported the victorious Allies in 1944. Thailand's resistance to the worldwide communist advance in Vietnam in the 1960s and 1970s was aided by financial aid from the United States. Now, I will present about the organization, which are Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC. Association of Southeast Asian Nation, or we call it as ASEAN. What is ASEAN? ASEAN is a regional intergovernmental organization that promotes political and economic cooperation and integration among its member states in Southeast Asia. ASEAN was founded on August 8, 1967. ASEAN bridged the physical and human geographic diversity of both mainland and insular Southeast Asia by including countries from both sub-regions. The Asian countries experienced a pattern of rapid industrialization beginning in the late 1960s, stimulated by foreign investment and government encouragement. In addition to the 5 original members of ASEAN, Brunei joined in 1984, and Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam all joined in the 1990s. The function of ASEAN is to accelerate regional economic growth, social progress, and cultural development, and to promote regional peace and stability. ASEAN member countries consist of Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Another organization in Southeast Asia is Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC. What is APEC? The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, which is a much more geographically inclusive economic alliance, may overshadow any gains made by Asia. The APEC organization referred to its membership as member economies, not member countries. In 2005, APEC had 21 member economies, including many countries in East Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia and New Zealand, Western Latin America, and Canada and the United States. Differing perception of what constitutes a fair economic treatment of individual countries' agriculture product and what is the appropriate political interaction with Taiwan are among APEC's current challenges. The APEC organization seeks to link the growing economies around the Pacific Ocean margins and to provide an alternative and formidable major world trade grouping to that of the North Atlantic area. These are all countries that are members of APEC. They had 21 members.
Now, I will be presenting about the subregions of Southeast Asia. It consists of mainland Southeast Asia, insular Southeast Asia, and economic activities in each subregion. Southeast Asia, a diverse and culturally rich region, can be divided into two primary parts. Mainland Southeast Asia includes countries such as Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, where the land has played an important role in shaping their histories. Insular Southeast Asia, on the other hand, includes Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, and East Timor, with its identity closely tied to the region's archipelagic nature. These two subregions demonstrate how the interaction of nature and human stories has shaped Southeast Asia's distinct character. Let's now discuss about mainland Southeast Asia, which includes Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. The subregions, insular and peninsular situation provides the majority of Southeast Asian countries with extensive stretches of coastline. The combination of spectacular coastal scenery with the subregion's rich cultural heritage and diversity form the basis of growing tourist industries in the 1990s and early 2000s. A skilled and cost-effective labor force supports the regional establishment of production facilities owned by foreign multinational corporations. The determination of several Southeast Asian countries to globally expand their industrial and corporate connections is challenged by ethnic and political instability. Such cultural fault lines are local features that affect the people, governments, and economies of the region differently. I'll then discuss economics and people. Economic conditions in mainland Southeast Asia range from the expanding economy of Thailand to the relatively closed economy of Myanmar to the more materially impoverished people in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. Improvement in health, education, literacy, and income from 1960 to 2007 in turn improved the overall economic conditions in many of the sub-region's countries. Next, let's delve into the economic crisis in the late 1990s. Rapid economic growth in non-communist Asian countries came to a halt in the late 1990s when overlending by banks in the region caused a major financial crisis. Many countries had to devalue their currencies. Thailand's economy suffered the most. The financial crisis led to a change in Thailand's government, which imposed austerity measures and distanced itself from the past with a new constitution. The problems were caused by high level of foreign borrowing, government budget deficit, major bank loans to glutted property markets, and slower than expected economic growth. Huge Japanese investment in the late 1980s and growth in exports from Southeast Asian countries were linked to a high yen value against the US dollar. By the late 1990s, however, the value of the yen fell, forcing the Japanese to slow investment and technology transfers to Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia's problem affected East Asia. Too much economic growth too soon under too much unsecured credit. By the early 2000s, new challenges came from China's growth, together with slowdowns in the American and Japanese markets for Southeast Asian goods. China provided both increased competition and increased markets. The redirection of foreign direct investment to China in the 1990s slowed Southeast Asia's recovery from the 1997 crisis of Chinese textiles in Vietnam, and higher value products in Thailand competed with those of the sub-region. Southeast Asian countries may meet these challenges by placing a greater emphasis on open government to attract investors, lowering trade barriers to open up markets, and upgrading domestic workers' skills. As I have mentioned before, Thailand's economy suffered most. So now, let me share Thailand after the crisis. The 1997 financial crisis in Thailand left many unfinished commercial and residential towers in Bangkok's skyline. The bubble burst when depositors withdraw their funds from banks, putting pressure on the baht, which is Thailand's currency, which was allowed to float and move downward. The cost of foreign debts doubled, and banks businesses collapsed, leaving the building shells as worthless assets. That still slowed the country's economy in the early 2000s, leaving half the industrial capacity idle. Despite these difficulties, Thailand's major export industries of oil products and vehicles grew, with exports to China quadrupling since 1993. Thailand's comparative advantages includes its membership in ASEAN, a strong local car parts industry, and tax incentives. The food processing industry, including tuna canning, is growing for the local middle-class market. Thailand's other growing industries includes illegal sex and drugs traders, which generate a public health crisis as HIV or AIDS and drugs-related problems spread. Yaba, the methamphetamines crazy pill, was first produced alongside heroin in the early 1990s and is now used widely as a recreational drug in colleges and schools. Children as young as 6 become addicts, and hospitals treat more Yaba addicts than alcoholics. The number of drug offenders in Thai prisons rose from just over 10,000 in 1992 to 100,000 in 2001, swamping prisons and the courts over the 18,000 cases per year. Most drugs are manufactured in the southern Myanmar, but traffickers use roundabout roads through Laos and across the Gulf of Thailand. Furthermore, farming changes in Southeast Asia have occurred on the mainland. The majority of people in Southeast Asia still live in rural areas and gain their living from farming. Although agricultural employment and agriculture's proportion of each country's income decline with the growth of manufacturing and service industries, as many districts and families change from local subsistence to a cash-based economy, they linked to and became dependent on growing urban and overseas markets. Such market demands lead to new crops and new strains of traditional crops being grown and to changing patterns of land ownership. The highest productivity occurs in the major river valleys and island coastal areas. In communist countries like Vietnam and Laos, reforms have led to land redistribution. People have land use right but do not own land. All land belongs collectively to the people of the country but is managed by the state on their behalf. In the 1990s, Vietnam rose from a marginal coffee producer to rival Brazil and became the world's largest exporter of the cheaper Robusta coffee. Grown in the central highlands, farmers from the crowded lowlands migrate into the highlands as the world coffee prices rose in the middle 1990s. But Brazil and other coffee producers also boost production, leading to an oversupply crisis. Vietnam began cutting its Robusta bean production in the early 2000s, while at the same time expanding its higher quality Arabica coffee trees in the north of the country, as well as encouraging farmers on poorer land to change crops to rubber, peppers, cotton, and hybrid corn. Now, let's talk about the communist Indochina. Vietnam's economic growth is slower than in Cambodia and Laos, with per capita incomes falling in the 1980s. The country's poverty is largely due to the effects of the 1950s until 1975 fighting on its territory, which disrupted all aspects of the economy. Vietnam's internal policies produced little economic growth, and the Soviet Union provided $1.5 billion per year in aid in 1980s but ceased assistance after 1989. The US and Asian countries blocked Vietnam from receiving overseas aid until 1991. Vietnam's leaders began opening agricultural sales in private markets in 1986, devaluing the Vietnam's currency and encouraging foreign investment. Vietnam became the world's third largest exporter in 1994. Vietnam established economic leadership over smaller countries like Laos and Cambodia. The shift to greater involvement in the world economy was easier in southern Vietnam, a capitalist country until 1975, than in the northern sector, which had been under communist control longer. Corporations from Japan, South Korea, Singapore and Taiwan invested in Vietnam in the mid-1990s, and in 1995, the US normalized relations with the country when Vietnam became the first communist member of ASEAN. Other than that, I will also explain about the political economy of Myanmar. Myanmar's political isolation stems from its lack of democracy and major economic imbalance, including rising inflation, financial deficits, and overvaluing the Burmese kyat. However, favorable relations with neighboring countries like China have helped the government develop the economy. Myanmar's Golden Triangle is a major source of opium and amphetamine drug production, with up the 18 million pills passing across the border into Thailand during 2001. The Wa people, a minority group that used to fight the Myanmar army, switched to selling drugs and fighting the Shan people. Myanmar's leaders allowed the drug trade, but Thai authorities resist it, aided by bribing officials and electricity supplies. In May 2008, Cyclone Nargis devastated Myanmar, killing over 100,000 people and causing economic damage. The military rulers were criticized for delaying relief efforts. Settled with the mainland Southeast Asia. Now I will move to the next sub-region, which is Insular Southeast Asia. Let's explore the island countries of Southeast Asia. Our cast includes Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Indonesia, East Timor and the Philippines. Malaysia is the most populous country in the sub-region, with 236 million people living in an archipelago of over 17,000 islands. The majority of the population is concentrated on 4 of the larger western islands, producing extremely high population densities. The Indonesian government created a national motto of diversity in unity to create a sense of national identity. Indonesia descended into violence and uncertainty after long periods under the virtual dictatorships of President Sukarno in 1949 until 1966 and Suharto in 1966 until 1997. Both periods ended with economic crisis and popular uprising against corruption. The lavish lifestyles of Indonesia's political elite centered on the extended Suharto family drained the country's economy, and the middle classes found upward social mobility capped by corrupt controllers. Foreign debt doubled between 1990 and 1996 as both large and small companies engaged foreign capital. The overturn of Suharto's authority led to social problems, including aggression against the Chinese business community in Indonesian cities, people resettled in Kalimantan, and the Christian Chinese in the Maluku Islands. After Megawati Sukarno Putri became president in 2001, economic conditions began to improve, and the International Monetary Fund was able to make a new agreement to reschedule the debts. Problems for Indonesia continue under current President Yudhoyono, with ethnic strife threatening to lead the country into political chaos. The Philippines is the most westernized country in the sub-region, with colonial influence from Spain and the United States. The long-term dictatorship of President Ferdinand Marcos ended in 1986, and since then, a fragile democracy that involves military influences struggles to maintain order. The Philippine economy advanced more slowly than other in the sub-region, and it remains one of the sub-region's most materially impoverished countries. Filipinos are common domestic help, or AMAs, in Hong Kong, the United States, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. Today, Some 10% of Filipinos, especially women, work abroad to support their families and educate their children. The Philippines received nearly 19 billion US dollar in overseas remittance in 2010. Islamist extremism continues to challenge the government, with government forces seeking to restrict the militant Abu Sayyaf group to Basilan Island of southern Mindanao. Malaysia has a small population relative to its rich natural resources and a long-term, strongly led government that seeks democratic mandates under the supreme rule of the Sultan. In the 1990s, Malaysia made the reduction of poverty a major policy objective, and poverty fell to 21% by 1985 and less than 14% by 2007. Brunei is a small country on the northern coast of Borneo, with oil and natural gas riches and a GNI per capita of around $10,000. Although its geographic position appears off the main global roadways, it is central to growing Southeast and East Asia. Brunei's rule by a Muslim sultanate began in the AD 1030s, and the concept of a Malay-Muslim monarchy was introduced in 1990 to promote Islamic values. Agriculture and forestry are among the economic activities found in the sub-region. Southeast Asia countries primarily use rice farming for farmland, but also produce commercial tree and fruit crops like rubber, palm oil, and pineapples in plantations. Good management of these plantations can produce an almost continuous harvest and year-round employment. Malaysia and Indonesia are the world's largest producers of palm oil, but Malaysian policies are diverting investment away from agricultural production into manufacturing. Wet rice cultivation, or paddy, remains the chief form of agriculture in Southeast Asia, with rain in Thailand and the Philippines and irrigation in much of Indonesia. The Green Revolution, which began in the mid-1960s, led to rapid increase in crop yields through the use of fertilizer, pesticides, mechanizations, and irrigation. The tropical rainforest, which covers much of Southeast Asia, is of great economic significance to Southeast Asian countries. Timber products from Malaysia and Indonesia dominate world production, with prices rising by 50% in the 1990s. Wood-using industries became more important in Sumatra and Kalimantan in Indonesia Borneo, as Indonesia increased the income from exploiting its forests. Malaysia claims to be responsible for sustainable logging, but exports more tropical logs and sawn timber than any other Southeast Asian country. Annual cutting reduces forest cover by 1 to 2%. Malaysia has not yet adopted international standards of forest management, and Western objections to unmanaged cutting on environmental grounds are resentment by governments in Southeast Asia, which cites their own controls over illegal logging and historic European and American forest removal. Now I will explain the second economic activity, which is mining in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, a major oil producer, is contributing to Southeast Asia's primary commodity exports. However, oil from Sumatra and Kalimantan accounts for only 20% of Indonesian exports, down from 80% in 1985. This decline is due to a decrease in new oil discoveries and the development of other income sources in Indonesia's manufacturing base. Indonesia is expected to become an oil importer due to growing energy demands and industrialization. Malaysia, once the world's largest tin producer, still exports some, along with oil and natural gas from Borneo. Indonesia's bauxite is mined in the Riau Islands in southwest Kalimantan, processed in a Kuala Tajoy smelter near Sumatran coal mines. Thailand is a major exporter of gems and jewelry, with rubies and sapphires mined along the east coast of the peninsula. The government owns large-scale processing facilities for agriculture and mining products, while medium and small-scale factories dominate consumer goods industries. The Indonesian textile industry is divided into government or multinational corporation owned spinning mills using imported raw materials. The third economic activities of Southeast Asia is market-led industrialization. The transition to commercial farming in Asian countries was gradual, but manufacturing growth was more rapid. By the time Southeast Asian countries became independent, most had factory-based industries. Import substitution industries initially supplied local markets and were protected by tariffs and quotas. However, by the 1970s, the small size of domestic markets, limits of local skills, and restriction imposed by government licensing offices made products expensive. In the Philippines, the term crony capitalism was used to describe the close linkage between bureaucrats and entrepreneurs. Multinational corporations invested in new factories, employed cheap labor, and used labor-intensive manufacturing processes. Malaysia moved from labor-intensive to high-tech industry sector growth in the 1980s. However, multinational corporations from the United States, Japan, and South Korea were slow in diffusing innovations to these growing countries. Export-oriented industrialization is labeled either capitalism and is an inferior substitute for development generated by local entrepreneurs based on local savings and investment. The education gap between these countries and wealthier ones makes it difficult for Southeast Asian countries to generate and develop their own innovations. The last economic activities is expanding tourism in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and the Philippines have seen a significant increase in tourist arrivals due to their cultural heritage, enhanced accessibility via airlines, and increased internet visibility. The country's attractions, such as modern cosmopolitan cities, pre-colonial historic preservation, and spectacular beaches and coral reefs, attract visitors. Upland resorts and ecotourism based on natural phenomena also attract visitors to places once closed by political actions. The industry brought in foreign currencies as fewer locals ventured abroad for vacations, with a majority going to Hong Kong and Japan. In contrast, the United States had over 15 million visiting tourists in 2007, while nearly 16 million Americans vacationed abroad. The temporary visitor declines resulting from the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami rebounded rapidly with little overall economic impact.
Before we wrap up, let's dive into a hot topic unfolding in Southeast Asia, the geopolitical challenges shaking up development strategies. Picture a chessboard of global moves impacting the region's growth. Geopolitical challenges to Southeast Asia development strategies.